Marvel's Phoenix Man, the ultimate power rises. Please like, share, and subscribe. Episode 131. The next scene, like the first interception line, thousands of missiles exploded one after another, and were detonated in a very small range, so that the energy catharsis was extremely violent, although it was still not as powerful as the nuclear explosion. But because it was a division of the point potential, the explosion was continuous, so the deceleration of the asteroid was also continuous. After all the missiles exploded, the speed of the asteroid also dropped again and again, about 1/3 slower than before. Sigh, you see, this is the means of human beings, it is amazing. Liang said with heartfelt admiration. Lorna next to her was a little speechless. It was not the first time she had seen Liang make a similar sigh to ordinary people, which seemed to her somewhat incredible. Obviously he was the culprit of the world, but he seemed to know more about the power of human beings than humans themselves. Look, humanity will eventually have an outbreak. She remembered this sentence with excitement, which was a sentence that Leon had said to her a long time ago, and now it seemed that he was really right and surprising. At this time, another loud noise that shook the heavens and the earth interrupted her thoughts, and she looked up to see that several nuclear bombs had been detonated on the route of the asteroid landing in the sky, the same situation as before, the same consequences. Once again, the asteroid's mass was stripped away, and its speed was drastically reduced, and even the landing orbit was once again deviated. Liang looked at it intently. In his eyes the nuclear explosion is a large-scale fireworks, and this fireworks scene, it is rare to see in the world. So many nuclear bombs in human history have been detonated in the atmosphere at the same time, only this one. The asteroid's appearance is now broken, and the funny smiling face he has spoofed is now beyond recognition, and the asteroid has also returned to its original iron-nickel color, showing a dark silver, and the near-perfect circle has also been broken, which now shows that it is even more potholed. Its mass was reduced by a full 40% compared to the original, and now only a diameter of more than 1,000 meters remains, and this diameter is further reduced as it descends and burns. At this time, the asteroid has reached a distance of only more than 10,000 meters from the ground, and it is obviously unrealistic to want to intercept at this distance. That is to say, the explosion just now was already the last time, and mankind was helpless in front of this small one. A smile suddenly appeared on Leon's face, and he felt that this matter could not be ended so simply, because although the speed of the asteroid had plummeted and the mass had plummeted, if it really had to fall down, then the entire United States would not be a problem. If a country is destroyed, the impact on other countries will not be so great, at least all mankind has survived, and it is believed that for other countries, the destruction of the United States is not a bad thing. And Leon is also waiting for the reaction of the American side, and such a result will certainly not be accepted. At this time, although the landing speed of the asteroid has been weakened to a very low level, for humans, this speed is still extremely fast, enough to have a speed of Mach 10, who can intercept it. In particular, this is still the speed that is already in the atmosphere, and no missile can reach this speed and then intercept it. That is, the opportunity in the United States is already small. The asteroid continued to do the most, and soon reached a distance of more than 6,000 meters above the ground, and at this time, in Leon's position, the violent vibration of the asteroid when it fell, as well as the harsh beep and rumbling tremor, and the air around it trembled. Time passed by minute, 10 seconds of effort. The asteroid was only more than 2,000 meters away from the ground, and it seemed that it was about to hit the ground at this time, and in this instant, the change was steep. A fierce stream of light shot out from a very distant place, which was an extremely strong ray, like a cannonball, directly hit the asteroid, and the asteroid's iron-nickel core had no blocking ability under this ray at all, and it was directly pierced. Immediately after, the second, third, and fourth paths, more than 10 rays in a row struck instantaneously, hitting the asteroid again, and then all of them ran through the asteroid. Subsequently, the body of the little nova, which was shaking due to the violent friction, exploded with a loud bang, exploded in an instant, and split into hundreds of different sizes, like a huge firework, exploding in mid-air. This instantaneous explosion made Liang stunned, subconsciously sighed, and then turned his eyes to the direction of those rays. The power of the mind spread out, and over a distance of several thousand meters, he saw a facility on the top of a mountain, a huge ball of pure silver luster, more than 60 meters in diameter, and the center of the ball was cracked, and 6 thick tubes stretched out from it, like the muzzle of a Gatling machine gun, and at this time, there was smoke coming out of the barrel. And Liang already knew in an instant that the materials of this facility were actually made of vibrating gold materials, and it was no wonder that he could bind the energy of such a high energy level and then directly launch it, which was completely black technology. The energy level in that ray is extremely high. If you make an analogy, the energy contained in a ray is more than tens of times more than the laser light of the laser eye, and it is no wonder that it can easily penetrate the asteroid with the iron and nickel core. Just when Liang wanted to find out again, the large and small fragments that had exploded had fallen to the ground, the largest of which was hundreds of meters in diameter, which would be indispensable if it hit the ground. At this moment, a huge explosion suddenly appeared on the ground, which was not caused by the impact of asteroid fragments, but by nuclear bombs. Another super high-yield nuclear bomb exploded here, exactly where the debris fell. Oh. Terrific, Liang was sincerely amazed. The power of this nuclear explosion is absolutely tens of millions of levels, and the timing of the explosion is also very good, just the moment when those fragments land, so that the power of the nuclear explosion is all used on those asteroid fragments, once again causing the falling speed of the asteroid fragments to drop sharply, and even a large part of them is directly vaporized. It's amazing. Leon sighed again. Episode 134, a space-time crack tens of meters wide appeared in front of the fighter. The fighter was controlled by Leon to float into it, and then the space-time crack closed, everything returned to the original, as if it had never appeared in it, but the huge fighter had disappeared. At the same time, above the headquarters of the sword-shaped building, a space-time crack appeared, and the fighter plane floated out of it, and Liang's figure appeared in front of the fighter, with his hands extended, and a piece of steel rose from the ground around him, melting rapidly in mid-air, and the color became red. Then the molten iron fused together, and a huge tarmac was built outside the terrace of the sword-shaped building, just enough to accommodate the battleship parked on it. After doing all this, Leon landed next to the fighter, reached out and tapped lightly on the fighter twice, and nodded with satisfaction. What he was satisfied with was not the fighter itself, even if the degree of science and technology of this fighter was high, in his eyes it was just a scientific and technological creation. What he was satisfied with was actually the material of this fighter, and this fuselage full of vibrating gold was the most valuable in his eyes. Leon heard it for a moment, then he heard Svija's voice. Sir, the cracking is complete, the master control program of this fighter has been rewritten by me, and now you can do whatever you want. Liang nodded his head, and the smiles on the two became brighter, and he said loudly, open the cabin door. With the sound of a closed gas flowing, a crack was opened in the fuselage in front of him, and then a cabin door was opened in front of him, and Li was inside the airport. Send 10 soldiers over and remove all non-vibrating materials and facilities inside the airport. He commanded again. Okay, sir. Oh yes, before this, don't forget to record the basic data of the fighter. Although this thing can only be regarded as the most high-tech product of the Earth, it is not much advanced in the universe, but recording it may provide me with some ideas later. Okay sir, the record is done. Leon nodded, and at this time, 10 soldiers flew up from downstairs, and without him doing anything to command, they fished in through the cabin door and began to get busy. The strength of the vibranium is second only to the metal of the Edelman alloy. The melting point is extremely high, but no matter how high the melting point, it is difficult to defeat the soldiers with many variant capabilities. Their actions are rapid, uniform, and for a time the entire airport is like a lively production line, and all kinds of mixed noises frequently sound. The reason why vibranium is precious, in addition to the very rare outflow from the outside, there is also a main reason is that its particularity, without the characteristics of Edelman alloy that cannot change the shape after a molding, that is to say, it can be forged and applied many times like ordinary steel, which is the biggest unexpected gain of this trip for Liang. With these vibraniums, he was able to come up with a lot of weapons and facilities that were still in the imagination, and the main purpose of them was the analysis and reconstruction of the vibraniums that Liang wanted to carry out. To put it bluntly, he must master the atom order of this special metal, as well as its special atomic properties, so that as long as the analysis is completed, then he can convert any matter into vibrating metal. At that time, he will have inexhaustible vibrating gold resources. With the ability to master the manipulation of subatomic matter, it is not difficult for him to do this. The difficulty is to master a strange metal, which is at best a matter of time. Soon, more than half an hour passed, and the 10 soldiers were surprisingly fast in their mobility, and soon piles of things were carried out and half of the terraces were placed, all of which were high-tech instruments, and all of them were ordered by Leon to be put into the laboratory. Jean and Lorna knew that he had something important to do, and neither of them came to bother him at this time, and when all the equipment inside the fighter plane had been emptied, he focused on the analytical material. The thought force radiated out, enveloping the entire fighter, and his perspective also changed, seeing the presence of the vibrating gold material and the depths, seeing the special structure of the metal, and the arrangement of atoms in a static state. Well, such a special structure, so that it almost does not conduct heat and kinetic energy. The key is not to conduct thermal energy, the advantage is buggy. If this is replaced by a past life, how can there be such an anti-heavenly material? The so-called non-conduction of thermal energy, in other words, this thing does not conduct heat, even if a certain point is heated to tens of thousands of degrees, the other place is still the original temperature, and this temperature is likely to be constant, and will not change because of the change in temperature. But the good thing is that even if this thing is against the sky, it only conducts almost no heat. And even if it is, it does not mean that it will not be heated, otherwise this thing cannot be forged into a different shape, and the temperature reaches a certain point, and this thing will still become a pool of molten iron. Under the control of his mind, he easily cut a small piece of material from the entire fighter fuselage, and Mou's fist was as big as his fist and slowly floated to him and stopped. Then he turned his thoughts again, and above the large piece of vibrating gold of the fist, a ball of flame was ignited, and this flame showed a fiery white color, which was caused by the temperature being extremely high, and its brightness had also climbed to the extreme. Visible to the naked eye, fist-sized metal blocks dissolve rapidly, and in a moment they become a pool of pale silver metal solution, suspended in midair changing shapes. Its melting point is more than 13,000 degrees, which is indeed very scary. Out of the artificial sun bound by magnetic force, there is no such high temperature in the natural world of the Earth, and the temperature of more than 5,000 degrees alone can vaporize people. Liang was surprised to find that after the thing was smelted, the stationary properties between the molecules were broken and became moving, but as its own temperature decreased, this movement was rapidly solidified. This solidification speed is very fast, just 10 seconds of effort, the metal molten solidified again, turned into an oval iron ball, and once again restored to the characteristics of vibranium. Well, it seems that the analysis of Jinjin has to start from here. Leon's eyes lit up, and he finally found something that interested him again. Episode 135. When he analyzed the vibranium, people all over the world were rejoicing, because a crisis that destroyed the world had been successfully stopped, although the turmoil in some countries was still not over, but for ordinary people, they saved the Earth, and the crisis of human extinction was over. While ordinary people are rejoicing, all the insiders at this time are still worried one by one. This crisis is indeed over, but no one knows what the next crisis will become. Up to now, Liang's several shots have been quite extreme. There is no pity at all, slaughtering an unknown number of military soldiers, let alone how many ordinary people have died or been injured because of his connections. But sometimes, he behaved very calmly, as if he had no interest in the whole world. Even if he watched the asteroid he had made was stopped by the group, there was no sign of wanting to shoot. This makes it a little unclear what he really thinks, one moment like a great villain who wants to destroy the world, but then let people unite to resist him, and no one can understand his thoughts and mental principles. Too hard to figure out, that's what all insiders think of him. And now all the people in power are planning how to counterattack, and the alliance formed to resist the fall of the asteroid was combined at this time, but because of this incident, the combination has become more and more close. They knew very well that only by truly uniting could they have the capital for Leon to fight, and if they were to be scattered like before, then they might be able to play themselves to death without Leon's hand. This was something that Liang hadn't thought of, but it was also something he was happy to see, and now he was doing his best to analyze Jinjin, not so hard to pay attention to other things, but this did not mean that he was indifferent to foreign affairs. In a flash, more than half a month passed. During this period, because of the analysis of vibranium, although he had not yet completed the analysis, he also successfully made the inferior vibranium. The so-called inferior vibranium is a metal inferior to the original vibranium in various values. The strength of this kind of vibranium is about 70% of the original vibranium. The molecule is in a relatively static state, but it is not as perfect as the original vibranium. It is a defective product, but this defective product is also a rare high-grade material. Coupled with the Edelman alloy formula he already had, he could completely recreate something similar to the material of Captain Miko's shield. And what Leon himself possesses, in itself, can give him the perfect ability to convert other substances into this material after analyzing a certain material, just like the previous point of stone into gold, the entire Manhattan neighborhood into a huge city of gold. So now for him, the secondary vibranium is already an inexhaustible thing, not precious at all, and there is the Edelman alloy that has been analyzed earlier. These two metals are not precious things for him. Another combination, it became a secondary Edelman vibranium alloy, and it also became a rotten street in his hands. However, in his hands is a rotten street. If it is left outside, it will still be an incomparably valuable thing, and even if he wants, he can use secondary vibrating gold to make human society reuse as a financial carrier and form a new financial order. Liang has always positioned himself as a scientist, thinking that the relationship between the power of the Phoenix, his IQ is far beyond ordinary people, coupled with the power of the Phoenix and some of his own abilities, which has led to his current unspeakable ability is amazingly strong. If you really want to make an analogy, his ability to speak alone is even more powerful than that of a country, and for example, he has already eaten through the technology contained in that fighter plane in minutes, and has also separated a lot of high-tech from it, which is a systematic super technology, which is also a big gain for him. During this time, he not only patronized to analyze the vibranium, but at the same time he also carried out a large-scale upgrade of the soldiers, and the materials used were added to the secondary vibranium component. In this way, the combat effectiveness of the current soldiers has increased exponentially, and the combat effectiveness of a single soldier has been called a monster level. Even if it is against the Magneto King, it is not necessarily defeated, and it can be imagined that its degree of terror is known. Even so, the current soldiers are just a transitional stage in Liang's eyes, and when Jinjin is truly parsed, the soldiers at that time can be regarded as mature bodies. Soldiers like that can easily overturn the whole world. In addition, the fighters he captured were also modeled after him and designed a new fighter, which was reduced by 30% in size, but the speed was 5 times that of the original version, reaching the super high speed of Mach 36. Such a speed is completely the speed of the space shuttle, which can be called a star fighter. In fact, this is indeed the case, because Leon's design idea is to use a starry sky fighter, which can completely fly on the moon and the Earth, and even if the fuel is sufficient, it can also take a flight around Mars. Of course, this must be closer to the Earth. Such a fighter is still just a transitional product, and Leon's purpose is to build a real space battleship, but now it is still a little far from this goal, but it is also very close, at least compared to other countries on the Earth. Leon alone has far more black technology in his hands than they themselves have. He was also aware of the movements of the outside world, and he also saw the current international situation in his eyes, but there was no look of worry. Those countries were afraid of his terrorist means, and now they did not dare to take the initiative to provoke him, and he was happy to use such fragmented time to strengthen himself. It is not so much to strengthen himself, not to say that he is developing science and technology. After all, his own ability can now be called the level of a god, and if he grows again, that is, the 4th level, at that stage, he will basically be able to dominate the universe, rather than still making a small fuss on the Earth. In the next 2 days, he finally succeeded in parsing the real vibranium. On this day, Leon looked at a ball of metal melt in the palm of his hand and showed a long-lost smile on his face. Episode 136. This blob of pale silver metal melt in the palm of his hand is the real vibranium substance, exactly the same as the original vibranium. There is no difference between the two, and this blob of metal melt is just Leon randomly breaking the metal table corner and then transforming it through the transformation between atoms. After turning stones into gold, he can transform other substances of any number of knowledge into vibrating gold, saying that he is not a god. So what is he? Leon casually squeezed. The metal melt in his palm was squeezed into a standard round ball, and quickly cooled down, placed in the palm of his hand to weigh twice, just such a ping-pong ball-sized metal ball, but it weighed almost half a kilogram. Release the hand, the metal ball falls, snaps, and falls to the ground. If it is other metal, this time it will definitely bounce, but the metal ball is steady landing, steady and static, not even rolling. Ha ha ha, with this thing, the soldiers can upgrade to a mature body. Leon was very happy, and then beckoned. The dribble flew back to his hand again. He reached out and lightly touched it, and saw that the surface of the ball rippled with a layer of ripples, and then where the ripples passed, the color was quickly changed, from the original light silver, to bright silver, and in the interior that ordinary people could not see, the order of the yard that made up the dribble was also displacement and change. This is a change from the inside out. It is a earth-shaking change in the overall structure of this vibranium. It is no longer just vibranium, but Edelman vibranium fused with Edelman alloy, which is exactly the same material as the shield of the Captain of the United States. Unfortunately, the alloy fused with Edelman metal has the same characteristics that the Edelman alloy cannot be shaped again, that is to say, the ball will remain this way from beginning to end, even if it is remelted. The resulting material is not Edelman alloy, but ordinary metal after the structure is destroyed. But this is the case for others. In his hands, he can easily shape the matter itself. He can produce these two metals indefinitely, and the material drawbacks that hinder his scientific and technological development are now being overcome. Snap. He snapped his fingers, and in the laboratory he was in, the ground quickly changed, forming a huge pool, and in the pool, the Edelman vibrating gold melt was churning. Because of the combination of the characteristics of the two, so this melt would be rapidly cooled, but the pool was added to his own ability, and it would always maintain the activity of the melt and prevent it from condensing. Svija, now start a big upgrade for all the soldiers, and on the basis of the existing upgrades I have previously upgraded, replace all the soldiers with this combination metal, and build another fighter. Also use this combination metal. Leon ordered. Okay sir, your order has been loaded into the production plan and is expected to be completed in 3 days. Svija rode. Very well, go for it. After doing these, Leon clapping his hands, the figure appeared on the top floor. Jean's daily life was in a daze, or she was familiar with her own ability, and Lorna usually paid attention to the fact that she was lying on the sofa, her jade body was horizontal, and she was relishing the news on TV. After following Leon, especially after Leon declared war on the whole world, Lorna had no normal life before, which was not a small loss for her, but in order to see the wider world in the future, this bit of boredom and tedium she could endure. Seeing Leon appear, she cast her eyes and said, "Busy? Yes, bored?" Leon asked. "Sort of." Lorna shrugged helplessly. Leon smiled lightly and sat down next to her, hugged her into his arms, and then said, "Then do something interesting." Well. Lorna's body trembled, because she had been thrown down by Leon, and the next thing was difficult to describe. In short, the clothes were thrown out, the sofa was ringing and so on. Lorna's current physical strength is still not enough to accept Liang's negative distance contact alone, often insisting on more than half an hour will be defeated, and usually at this time, she will ask Qin for help. For example, at this moment, she screamed and called out the name of the piano. Qin, come and help, I'm going to die. Qin is very indifferent, even if Lorna intends to have a good relationship with her, she is still so indifferent, not half interested in external objects, but only interested in things that enhance her strength. And the way she increased her strength was to have a friendly match with Liang, who had already been familiar with the road, and when she heard Lorna's call, her figure appeared directly next to the two people, or the kind of chiguoguo. This absurdity took more than 2 hours directly, Liang was relaxed, and the two women were paralyzed as mud. When Leon used his ability to put the two women on the bed, because both women were already asleep, and he sat on the sofa with red wine and watched the news. The protagonist of the news is him, and the headline is Threats Affecting the World, How Long Will We Have to Endure Him After All? Such hostile news headlines have appeared many times before, and in the news they are nothing more than various experts expounding their own arguments, analyzing from all aspects why Leon did this and what his purpose was. The most controversial of these are still conspiracy theorists, who feel that Leon wants to conquer the world, establish a new regime headed by him, and enslave all people, whether ordinary or mutants, to become his slaves. And those means of threatening the world are nothing more than his desire to make the whole world obey him. Not to mention, in such an argument really won the support of many people, at least in ordinary people. If Leon did not have a purpose, then he had no reason to do so, and interest is always the first driving force for people's actions. Seeing this, Leon couldn't help but smile, but also felt quite funny why he did this. It was only out of his own interest. As for what enslaved the whole world, he didn't even think about it. If he really wanted to, he now had the ability to destroy the world in minutes, and he didn't have to spend so much effort to toss it at all. What he wanted was to see how far humanity could go under his persecution and oppression. Whether it erupts under pressure or sinks under pressure. Episode 137. The reaction of the human world was more intense than he thought, and the action was faster than he thought, and what Leon did not expect was that the United States actually directly provided the robot manufacturing methods they mastered to other countries free of charge. No less than 20 countries have been given this method of combat robots, basically including the top 20 countries in the world's GDP, and to be honest, this is the first time Leon has seen the United States so generous. Whether there was a political game in this was something he didn't know and wasn't interested in knowing, but he was surprised by the outcome anyway. When did America turn sexual? That's what he thought. Then there was even more surprising news that came to him. Led by the United States and China, the United Earth Army was established, which was different from the loose international organization of the United Nations, but a real joint army, and nearly 30 countries were quickly linked together, with money and powerful contributions, and millions of troops were organized in a short period of time. This is not the most ruthless. The United States in this matter did make Leon a little unequal. This million-level coalition army, half of which was thrown into the United States. Yes, you read that right, the number of troops of more than 500,000 people, as well as all kinds of equipment, were all put on the territory of the United States in one go, and the number of troops in China and Russia was already more than 60% of the 500,000 miles. As the world's number one for a long time, the United States has always been very hostile to China and Russia. These two countries can be regarded as the lifelong enemy of the United States, and now the United States actually has such determination, which is really unpredictable. As a battlefield of war, the United States is also the country that has suffered the most losses under Leon, and now even its sovereignty and national defense have been thrown to one side, and the forces of the world have been linked to deal with him, and it seems that Leon's existence has really made them feel a great threat. In such a situation, Leon did not have half a point. On the contrary, he was extremely happy. He finally saw the world's major countries unite, although not the whole world combined, but this is also a big leap, especially for the United States, which has always been the boss of the earth. It is very rare. Leon had thought that the United States would pause a little when it did this, but the reality surprised him again, and the United States naturally declared war on him directly. Yes, it was a declaration of war, or a declaration of war in the form of a year-round live broadcast, and at a certain moment, all the television stations in the United States broadcast the president's declaration of war to Leon. In the history of mankind, there has never been an individual like Leon, who is pure evil and has no ill will for any reason, who is the devil of hell, the source of all the calamities that bring mankind, and his appearance is a great loss to the whole of mankind. Here I call on all the people of conscience in the world to stand up against him, because he is stronger than everyone can imagine. The most powerful weapon suppressed by mankind, the nuclear bomb, has no effect on him, and he can easily summon an asteroid that is enough to destroy, which is only a small point in his many means. Consider his previous warning: in 3 months, the moon will collide with our homeland, and at that time, no life on Earth will be spared. Therefore, we must unite the front, together against him, against the devil who brought disaster to the whole world. Now I declare that the United States has entered a state of war with him, and the outcome of this war will only have one winner left, and the other side will be destroyed. This live broadcast Leon naturally also watched. He looked at the TV picture of the impassioned president, could not help but laugh a little. Sir, the movement of the coalition forces has been detected, and the first 13,000 troops are approaching the occupied area of New York. Viscar informed him in due course. Leon nodded, didn't say anything more, just said, according to the previous filing operations, first send air troops to contact the enemy forces, and then let the ground troops advance. Yes, he was talking about advancing, not letting go, because in his opinion, no matter how many people and how well equipped they were, in his eyes, it was still difficult to resist his own strength. It should be known that in addition to analyzing the vibranium substance during this time, he has made 2 major upgrades for the soldiers, and any soldier has the ability to not be afraid of the murderers such as Magneto. And now the number of soldiers under his command has already exceeded 50,000, just imagine what kind of force this is, and it is no problem to push the world across. He was going to do the same thing next, and after preparing for so long, he had to surprise the world. As for the air error in his mouth, that is, through the analysis of the captured fighters, the new type of fighters created, the number of fighters is not much now, but there are also 10, each of which is a black technology level, and the technology content alone can directly crush Tony Stark's Mark suit. With his order, a hole of more than 20 meters high was split in the center of the sword-shaped building, from which fighters quickly flew out, one after another, and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. Now the search for the building has become a hole, and even he has not relaxed the transformation of the sword-shaped building. If anyone can see the underground, he will find that the base of the sword-shaped building has become a 6-shot thruster when it is on it. The current material of the sword-type building has also unconsciously become an Edelman vibrating gold alloy, a sword-type building that is hundreds of meters high, and now it is completely a space station. This was the headquarters base of the two. He naturally had a plan a long time ago, and even at this time, the transformation of his sword-shaped building had not yet been completed, but only a slight re-architecture of the main structure was completed, which was far from his final transformation plan. As for what his final transformation plan is, in fact, it is very simple. He is going to transform this battleship into a super battleship that can pass through the cosmic wall film, which must be a long process, and the scientific and technological content required in it is not at all what he can do now. But now that he has laid the groundwork, he will continue to renovate in the future. Episode 138. The American side placed the battlefield more than 300 kilometers outside of New York City, which was the farthest place for Leon's soldiers to expand outward, because it was a targeted advance. The soldiers' advance speed was not very fast before, and even paused for a long time in the middle, because Leon upgraded the soldiers twice in a row, and it also took time. And the army of more than 200,000 people also gathered on the battlefield that the United States had decided on in advance, and they had full confidence that Leon would send people here to fight a decisive battle with them. The war is a matter between the two sides. If one side does not contact at all, then the war will naturally not be fought, but the army of more than 200,000 people is not placed here, and it is not a small threat to Leon's side, so he will indeed let the United States do as he wishes. It was a vast plain, surrounded by fields, with only grass and only low trees, and the coalition had built a long defensive line here from the beginning, with heavy weapons such as tanks, mortars, artillery vehicles, and rocket launchers lined up in rows. In order to fight this battle, the United States has increased its investment, and there are many foreign equipment, which can completely fight a very large battle, which is enough to show the determination of the United States and most of the world's countries. As for the high sky above the sky, there are even more teams of warplanes flying by, except that there is no sea here. The Air Force and Army are all complete and fully prepared. In the Provisional Operations Command, officers from the United States, China, Russia, and several other countries gathered to make arrangements for the next engagement. Many of them are general-level people in charge of the overall situation, which is one of the few coalition forces in human history, except for World War I and World War II. This can already be regarded as World War III, except that one side is the coalition army of the human world, and the other side is a person. Gentlemen, Leon's threat is far more terrifying than you think, especially the soldiers under his command, each of whom has the strength of an alpha-level mutant, and only omega-level mutants can suppress it, and there are few such mutants in the world, and there are 5 around Leon. An American general said heavily. The faces of the people present were solemn. They knew Leon's horror, but when they were told in person, the pressure suddenly appeared. Therefore, no matter what the circumstances, we should have no less caution, and the cooperation between the armies of our various countries must also be close, so that we can put aside our previous prejudices and use the best cooperation to face the enemy this time. Everyone present nodded, and then a Chinese general said, according to the information you have given us by the American side, this Leon really can't be treated with common sense. But can such a powerful and terrifying person be defeated by these conventional weapons alone? Others also have this suspicion. They do not have much intuitive feeling of Leon's terror, The only understanding is what Leon has done since this time, and most of them also know from intelligence and news. They know that Leon is terrible and difficult to deal with, but how to deal with it is not easy to deal with. Their senses have not yet experienced. The American general shook his head with a heavy face. It is impossible. With his degree of terror, our weapons are unlikely to hurt him even a little, and our role is only to play a slight role in him, and what can really stop him depends on the team of mutants. This time we have brought a total of nearly 100 mutant heroes from China, many of whom are super strong, and other countries have also brought some more or less. I believe that these people should play a decisive role on the battlefield. General Huaxia rode. The others nodded as well. Their coalition was just ordinary warriors and these conventional weapons and equipment, but secretly there were mutants who came with them, and these people were specifically requested by the United States, because when the United States was organizing the coalition army, it was only possible to use the same strength as him. What is the same power as Leon? That is naturally these mutants. Mutants are outliers in society, and they are also discriminated against by normal people, but these people hold the power that ordinary people cannot grasp, and before Leon appeared, there had never been a country or organization that could organize so many mutants and quickly recognize their normal social status. All this is also brought by Leon, who has made the world see the horror of mutants, and ironically, now, everyone who saves the survival of ordinary people in the world has to be left to the mutants. In short, everyone, let us do our best to drag Leon and create the greatest help for the mutant team, and our role is only that. The American general said heavily. Hearing this, the hearts of all the people present could not stop sinking, and from the words of the American general, they felt a deep pressure, and the officers of some countries were still full of ambition, but now it seems that it is completely arrogant and contemptuous of Leon. At this moment, a harsh siren sounded in the conference room, followed by someone rushing in and shouting, "Report." There was a warrior energy reaction in the front, and according to the observation, the number was no less than 3,000. Sizzle. There was a sound of cold air in the conference room, and General America's brow tightened, and he asked in a deep voice, "Has Leon appeared?" "Report, General." "No." But one guy showed up, and it was Captain Steve. The man shouted. The American general looked straight and then said, "That's not Captain Rice, soldier. Remember, from now on there will be no Captain in America. That has become history. Now tell me, which one is Steve?" The soldier's face turned solemn, "The one who is good at casting corrosive gases." The American general took a deep breath, then sighed, "Okay, I see. Order it down, and all the troops are on alert, ready to fire at any time." "Yes." The people who came took the command and left. Then the American general said to all the people present, "Gentlemen, here comes a terrible figure. Corruption." Episode 139, Corruption? Everyone present was stunned. There was corruption and killing, distortion and depravity, and they all knew the information of these four people, but like Liang's senses, they did not have a clear understanding. Yes, corruption. His predecessor was Captain Steve Rogers, but because of the failure of a special experiment, it split into four separate individuals, and among those present, Huaxia should have had contact with the depravity of these four people. General America explained. Yes. The person on the Huaxia side bowed his head slightly, and then said, "According to our information, the fallen once went to the Kunlun Mountains in our country before, where he mastered the Tao heart, thus suppressing some evil desires in his heart, and before that he had always regarded himself as the captain of the United States. But why did he become a fallen now?" "That's because of Leon." General America sighed. Then he gave a detailed introduction to how the four of them had become what they are now, and then he said, "Although he is not as terrifying as Leon, but the threat to the world is not small at all, and at this time comes the same terrible corruption as him, and his ability is even more desperate for ordinary people. That is a terrifying force that can corrupt all things, and among the available known means, only some people in the mutants can resist him. And this ability is fire, ice, and air control, and now everyone here in trouble. Identify which of the mutants brought in have what kind of ability, select them individually, although they will be used in the duel with corruption." At this suggestion, the others quickly began to give orders among the people they had brought with them, and the temporary command was immediately busy. At this time, outside, the army was ready to continue, all guns were loaded, all kinds of artillery were ready, and in the sky far ahead, a large shadow of soldiers could already be seen. The first to be disarmed were the air forces, and countless helicopters roared up, each of them full of shells. These were the vanguard of the air superiority, and when they reached the firing range, they opened fire directly. The Provisional Command had already given orders to the various units, and it was still the right to fire freely, so the Air Force attacked with great decisiveness. Suddenly, countless streams of fire spewed out from the barn under the belly of the aircraft, and the sound of grunting was incessant, and from a distance, the combined fire strike of the helicopter unit was as amazing as a rain of fire, and it actually produced a sense of covering the sky and the sun. The number of rockets and aircraft guns is simply too many to count. this is the real barrage, while at the same time, the anti-aircraft artillery phalanx of the ground troops also opened fire at the same time, which is an air defense force, and the firepower is even more powerful and terrifying. The shells were like rain, and the tail of the flames was like a curtain, which instantly formed the first line of reassurance and the first attack. Boom! A moment later, the sound of shells exploding in pieces sounded incessantly, and I saw that in front of the more than 3,000 soldiers in the distant sky, they suddenly exploded one piece after another of fire, and all the shells exploded among them, which was extremely amazing. But even so, even if the attack of the human army side produced such a terrible power, it still did not have much impact on the soldiers, and only slightly made their formation a little more chaotic. At this time, it can be seen that a layer of energy shields can be stretched out in front of each soldier, glowing with light blue, and there are matrices in that light blue, which is a shield composed of pure energy, and the use is not technology, but magic. This is a set of magic shield systems designed by Leon for each soldier after eating Asgardian magic, which can block many energy attacks and many physical attacks. The explosion of the shell is a very typical physical attack, and this characteristic is also just within the defensive range of the magic shield, so that it can be seen that with the explosion, many soldiers outside the body of the magic shield immediately stirred up layers of ripples. And the soldiers who were bombarded by the explosion on the front, the layer of magic shield is more vibrating and seems to be broken, but in fact, this is just a means of defense. It will not break at all, unless it is an extremely strong explosion, such as at the center point of the explosion of hundreds of tons of TNT explosives. Such a power will indeed make the shield break, but now this piece of explosion is not enough to make the soldier's shield damaged. The attacks of the air and ground forces did not stop at all, but the offensive became more and more intense, and the patches of rockets and artillery were like raindrops constantly smashing the soldiers, hoping to bring them enough losses. The rumbling sound continued, countless flames burst out, and again on the path passed by the soldiers, this kind of battle-level vitality poured out, but there was still no way to take the soldiers. Subsequently, the fighters in the higher altitude position appeared, and under their belly, there were missiles with high explosive energy, and a total of no less than 300 fighters swooped together from all directions, bringing enough acceleration to themselves, and then during this period, they all launched the missiles under the belly, and the target was naturally those soldiers. From a distance, it looked like countless meteors, naked with long tail flames, falling rapidly from high in the air, and then all of them poured out in front of the soldiers. Boom! It was a series of even more terrifying explosions, and even if the sound wave was generated at a very distant distance, when it approached the army, it still shook the scalps of all the soldiers present, and some of them were even more shocked and had no face. This is indeed a war. One side is fully equipped and extremely well amended, while the other side is completely high-tech creation. There is a huge disparity in the number between the two sides, but in terms of combat effectiveness, it is obvious that the smaller number of the side is superior. Even if they suffered such a terrible blow, they did not let the soldiers move forward a little slack, and even now, not even a single soldier had been defeated. In the temporary command headquarters in the rear, all the commanders were watching the changes in the field, and seeing such a scene, some of the winning streaks had lost their blood color. Do you see? That's the horror of Leon. He didn't have to do anything to force the whole world into a desperate situation. Episode 140. We can't wait like this. We must let the troops launch a more violent attack, otherwise when those things get closer, our ground troops will not be able to hold on at all. Many people present were silent, but that silence was quickly broken. The generals of the three countries of America, Huaxia, and Russia nodded, and then the general of Huaxia said, "You can try to increase the intensity of the attack and try it with the plan specified earlier." Okay, that's it. They had already made combat arrangements earlier, and naturally they had prepared several contingency plans in advance, which can be said to be very well prepared, and the best way to face the soldiers' inability to enter the sword and gun was to increase investment. Well, the American side can do it. General Huaxia rode. The American general nodded, then picked up the phone and said, "Inform the Air Force to throw high-powered weapons." After putting down the phone, everyone present was nervously watching the changes in the war situation, and by this time, the soldiers had left the army at a distance of about 6 kilometers, and even the ground troops could already see the incomparably terrifying explosion in the air in front of them, as well as the incessant sound of explosions. Some soldiers have sweaty palms, and if they are fighting with soldiers or terrorists from other countries, all of them will not be afraid and nervous. But now they are facing a group of non-humans, which makes them feel a sense of fear of the unknown. The solemn atmosphere spread among the army, but fortunately, these soldiers are elite, and their psychological quality is excellent. Even if they are uneasy in their hearts, they still firmly adhere to their posts. At this moment, the group of fighters in the high altitude once again swooped, the ammunition compartment under the belly of the aircraft opened, followed by another salvo, and countless rockets roared and flew rapidly into the distance, and then exploded again. However, the soldier side did not know that among these rockets and missiles, There were several different things, such as one of the missiles was exceptionally thick. The other missiles were 30 or 40 centimeters in diameter and more than 1 meter long, while this missile was 50 or 60 centimeters in diameter and almost 2 meters in length. This missile fell behind the other missiles, and in front of it, all the missiles and rockets had begun to explode, and the flames suddenly splashed out, blocking the sight of all the soldiers, and the corruption of the leader had encountered this situation several times, and it was not surprising that this was an ordinary attack. Yes, this kind of large-scale coverage indiscriminate firepower strike is indeed an ordinary attack in his eyes, and he has only used his ability to make the power of those missile explosions unable to cause half damage to himself, and then together with the soldiers, he is ready to rush through the fire blockade. But at this moment, an extremely terrible sense of crisis enveloped him. Corruption had the personality and cognition given by Liang, and it seemed extremely sensitive to this danger, which could be said to be the sixth sense, or it could be said that he himself was overreacting to the danger. In short, he did not want to think about it, so he fled from the place in an instant, and his figure instantly appeared 200 or 300 meters away. At the same time, a blazing blob of light exploded in his original position, and endless bursts of light and heat were as dazzling as if there was suddenly an extra sun in midair. Nuclear bomb? The corrupted eyes shrank, his face became solemn, and then his endless radiation energy hit his body, and the terrifying heat energy rays made the skin all over his body fester, evaporated by the high temperature, and in an instant, the side of his face facing the nuclear explosion was only bones. It is true that he left the central area of the nuclear explosion, but for the nuclear explosion, 200 or 300 meters is still within the scope of the nuclear explosion, but the power has dropped a lot. Corruption is indeed a terrifying creature, it is true, it is indeed one of the strongest people on the earth, but in the face of nuclear bombs, he does not have the ability to open his mouth and swallow. Not everyone has the power of the phoenix, which can swallow the same ability as nibbling turnips. He was swept away by ultra-high energy radiation and heat, and the degree of physical injury at this moment was a degree of terror that he had never had before. The corrupted eyes were blinded, the skin and flesh of the face instantly turned into fly ash, even the bones were plowed a layer, even the forehead bones were cut off, the brain tissue was exposed, and a piece was wiped out by the terrible power of the explosion. He was like a rag, thrown with the terrifying power of the nuclear explosion, thrown out at a much faster speed than when he came. This was a corrupt encounter, and at the same time, more than 3,000 soldiers at the center of the nuclear explosion really tasted the terrible power of the nuclear explosion. In an instant, the thousands of soldiers closest to the center of the nuclear explosion did not even have time to use the mutant ability, and at this moment, they were melted into molten iron by the ultra-high temperature, and then blown away into fly ash and iron juice by the extremely terrifying thermal radiation. That is to say, these more than 1,000 soldiers died directly, and there was no longer the possibility of being repaired in half a year. Even if their whole body is made of the Earth's strongest metal Edelman vibranium alloy, they still can't resist such a terrible ultra-high temperature and thermal radiation, not to mention that the nuclear explosion is not only these. The characteristics of vibranium not being hot can indeed reduce its loss, but the radiation in the nuclear explosion can destroy the molecular chain in it, so the collapse is a matter of an instant. The remaining soldiers who are slightly farther away, 50 or 60 meters away from the center of the nuclear explosion, the situation is a little later, but the good is also very limited. The whole body is melted, the core is burned, although it can still vaguely maintain a vague human form, but it is also directly dead, but it also maintains a certain degree of repairability. And some of the outside, the situation is even better. The magic shield instantly collapsed, the metal layer on the surface of the body was melted, but it was firmly bound by its own ability, and then each of them automatically used their ability to quickly escape, and finally escape the disaster dangerously. However, the explosion of this nuclear bomb directly wiped out more than 3,000 or 80% of the soldiers, and finally fled, and still retained the combat effectiveness, not more than 600. The determination of mankind to resist was also revealed at this moment. Episode 141. This was something that Leon hadn't expected, or that he didn't care at all whether these soldiers would be destroyed. All he wanted was for these soldiers to appear in an absolutely crushing posture and crush them all. Now it seems that this plan is a bit too much of a matter of course, and the means of the coalition side are really unexpected by him. When Liang, who was far away from the headquarters in New York, learned of this news, he only raised an eyebrow, gave a soft sigh, looked at the screen in front of him and meditated silently, but after a moment he smiled. I really didn't think of it, but everything is within the acceptable range, so you can't just recklessly go over. With this in mind, he ordered, Svija, let the remaining intact soldiers disperse, stop swarming, and then wipe out the air forces as fast as possible, and then push the ground troops sideways. Okay sir, the damaged soldiers have been evacuated by my order, and the completely destroyed soldiers need to be recovered? Svija rode. Liang smiled and shook his head. No, since it has been scrapped, then throw it away, don't care, you can just take care of the rest of the things. Okay sir, please wait for the good news. Svija rode. Liang was slightly stunned when he heard this, and then he was dumbfounded, and he found that Svija's only level was really getting higher and higher. In other words, such words were impossible to say. Well, I'll just wait for the good news. At the same time, on the other side, in the middle of the battlefield, the aftermath of the nuclear explosion is gradually dissipating, and the shock wave plows the plains within a kilometer of the circle, and in this circle, the ground has settled several meters, and near the center, the land has been baked into glass by the high temperature of the nuclear explosion, and farther away, the ground has become magma. The mushroom cloud towered like a heavenly dome, and the clouds in the sky had already been dispersed by the shock wave, revealing a blue sky dome that looked as flawless as a sapphire from a distance. The coalition forces were outside the blast range of the nuclear explosion, which was absolutely safe at this distance, and even if the shock wave spread here, it was equivalent to a stronger wind, and did not cause any damage to the coalition positions. On the other hand, the soldiers on the other hand really suffered heavy losses, although it is not said that there is not 1 in 10, but at most there is only a number of 20% or 30% left, and the corruption as the leader is even more miserable. Now he was fiercely slammed to the ground by the shock wave, and Xingxing plowed a ravine on the ground, and the side he faced the impact had already been cut by the terrifying power and would be left with bones, and his internal organs had been dug up by Xingxing in a large layer, and the blood flowed continuously. If an ordinary person becomes like this, it is estimated that he has already died and cannot die anymore, but he is a super creature, who has already left the existence of the human category, and he has an incomparably terrifying ability to recover. Even under such a look, he still does not die. Corruption just lay motionless on the ground, looking as if he were dead, but when the radiation he had received was dispelled clean, his body began to recover rapidly. Radiation will destroy the inner structure of people, cut off chromosomes, destroy cells, and the radiation left in the human body, but also kill white blood cells, prevent cell regeneration. People who are subjected to huge amounts of radiation will generally continue to rot their skin and flesh, and die in the intense pain of flesh and blood that cannot be regenerated. He had been in this half-dead state all these times, that is, the reason why the radiation energy was in his body. To put it simply, it was the radiation that inhibited his regenerative recovery ability, making him no different from ordinary people at that moment. But when his own regulation system expelled the radiation energy and eliminated it, the recovery ability once again gained the upper hand, which caused the situation of rapid regeneration at this time. However, in just 5 or 6 seconds, the appearance of only the dead bones in his front had disappeared, the flesh and blood were full, and he could no longer see the terrible appearance just now. Phew. Corruption exhaled a deep breath. Just now his lungs have been destroyed, then half a day has been in a state of suffocation. This is him, replaced by any other person. Just this suffocating feeling can drive a person crazy. The corrupt body took off into the air, looked around, recalled the miserable appearance just now, and couldn't help but scold. Fuck. And then he got angry. Try a nuclear bomb close to the face, that is, his head iron is not dead. If the ability is slightly weaker, even if it is only a little weak, then he will definitely not have the possibility of survival. Smack he. Then he saw countless dark gray mists sprung up around him, spraying from every corner of his body, spreading like a thick fog in an instant, extremely fast, and in a few moments it had enveloped the area with a radius of hundreds of meters around him. In this gray mist-shrouded area, the ordinary dirt on the ground was hatched into a dark black swamp, constantly churning bubbles, and even the nuclear radiation itself was corrupted and decayed. That's his ability, amazingly strong. At this moment, what greeted him was a rain of cannonballs in the sky, falling down on him like raindrops, and countless flames burst out, staining a large area of red. The pure explosive energy dispersed most of the gray mist that had just spread, and even the corrupt ground was blasted out of one big hole after another. At the same time, the fighters in the sky once again dumped a piece of missiles. The number was not as terrifying as before, but it was still extremely impressive, and the explosive fluctuations generated were naturally very strong. The gray mist was once again damaged, but the corrupted back body was surging with ripples, blocking out the fire and the kinetic energy of the explosion. He smiled coldly, and with a wave of his hand, all the corrupt gases that had been extinguished by the explosion reappeared, and this time, all the flames were directly corrupted, turning into a cloud of dark green strange flames, which disappeared after a few twists in midair. At the same time, the remaining soldiers quickly lifted into the air, and one by one the speed had risen to the peak in the blink of an eye, and the speed was like a ray of light, pulling out a large piece of streamer in midair. Boom! A fighter plane exploded in the air for no reason and became a big fireball. Episode 142. A stream of light flickered, like lightning appearing out of thin air, and then showed a wisp of knife-flying rays, more like a laser beam, with a dazzling light. Every ray of light flashed, there would be a fighter plane penetrated by the air, and then a rumble exploded, turning into a raging flame, planted from a high altitude. Hundreds of soldiers who still retained combat strength, with their special ability, easily hit down pieces of fighters, and the sound of explosions frequently sounded, although not as fierce as the missile explosions, but together, they sounded like firecrackers. The generals of various countries in the rear temporary command all changed their faces after seeing this scene, and Commander Roluas immediately shouted, "Let the air forces retreat, so that they can't support it at all." The American general looked heavy, shook his head with some helplessness, and sighed, "No, the previous plan has already taken into account the occurrence of this situation, let them deal with it themselves." The general on the Huaxia side seemed to be calmer, as if he had been prepared for this, looking at the damage and indifferent, but if he looked closely, he would find that the clenched fist showed his inner unpeace. The command headquarters was silent, everyone's face was heavy, and everyone was nervously watching the battlefield, ready to deal with special situations. These soldiers all have their own intelligent programs, and their level of intelligence is also extremely high, and in the face of the counterattack of the air forces, one by one they have shown extreme rapidity, and they also have the upper hand in the high-altitude entanglement, and the suppressed coalition air forces cannot raise their heads at all. In the blink of an eye, 10 minutes have passed, and these 10 minutes have been extremely long and difficult for the coalition forces. Thousands of fighters and helicopters have been destroyed, and the more they go to the back, the faster the fighters are damaged, and it seems that in a few moments the entire air force will be wiped out. At this time, the people in the command headquarters finally gave the order to retreat, and in a flash, all the helicopters and fighters fled like falling dogs, one by one, without the courage to continue to resist with the soldiers. If it were not for the professionalism of the body and the responsibilities on their bodies, then these fighter pilots would have had a psychological collapse long ago, but even if they persisted until now, they were extremely difficult to endure individually, and the death of their colleagues one by one brought huge psychological pressure to these pilots. Although it is not a collapse, the Air Force has indeed been crippled, hundreds of soldiers against thousands of fighters, the momentum of the encirclement, in this case, with the terrible combat ability of the soldiers, the coalition Air Force has no ability to resist at all. The commanders in the rear, one by one, had extremely heavy hearts, and in the face of such an opponent, they did not know how to deal with it, or they could not find a way to defeat it, which was extremely desperate. "We can't just wait to die like this, we have to find a way to deal with it," a general shouted angrily. The three generals of the United States, Huaxia and Relusi, looked at each other, and then nodded in unison, and the American general said, "The troops of the whole line are retreating, and there will be another nuclear bomb strike, this time with a large yield." The whole coalition army was ordered to move quickly. These troops were the most elite in every country. The order was extremely easy, and as soon as they said retreat, they could already move, but in just 3 minutes they had already left the defensive line. At this time, the missile vehicles on the ground roared in unison, and countless missiles attacked the front again. The situation at this time is very similar to the previous one, and these missiles are also mixed with a nuclear bomb, and the yield is not small. The previous nuclear bomb had a yield of only 500,000, and the explosion generated was already extremely terrifying, but in the end it was only a very small nuclear bomb, so corruption could survive the bombardment of the nuclear bomb, which was actually a strange fluke. But this time the bomb has 2 million equivalents, which is still a small yield bomb, but its power is increased exponentially. However, in the face of this missile rain, the soldiers would not be so stupid. With Liang's order, they had dispersed early after the collapse of the Allied Air Force, and they were only dealing with dozens of soldiers head-on. And the horror of corruption who tried the nuclear bomb can be said to have left a lot of shadow in his heart, and he had already dodged it early at this time. Boom! An earth-shattering loud noise that could not be described, a light cluster that was so bright that the price of the sun's rays appeared instantly, bringing with it an endless shock wave and terrifying power. Radiation, shock waves, and the glare of the nuclear bomb explosion instantly became the focus of the entire battlefield, and dozens of your soldiers facing each other were suddenly enveloped by all this, and they were directly vaporized without half a reaction. This was a necessary loss, it was Svija's own order, in order to let these dozens of soldiers die. As for what it thought, then no one knew. Leon only smiled when he saw it, and did not say anything more. Episode 143. The aftermath of the nuclear explosion lasted for 10 minutes before it dissipated slightly, and in the process, the coalition positions had been retreating, and now they had retreated for more than a kilometer, and the speed of this march was really strong. At this distance, it is basically unaffected by the nuclear bomb. Behind them were huge fireworks, and the soldiers under Liang were re-pursuing, and many soldiers were doubling their psychological pressure, some worried about whether they would be affected by the nuclear bomb, and some were wondering whether they would die in this battle. They are all mortal flesh, and compared with this monster that can escape under a nuclear bomb, their battlefield survival rate is indeed pitifully low. And at this time, they were finally attacked. The attack came from the sky, countless beams of light descended from the sky, just like high-energy laser light, glowing with brilliant yellow light. Each ray of light was pointed out by hand, and it fell like rain. And every ray of light will pierce the body of a soldier, so that he will die directly before he can even scream. Like this light, there are thousands of ways, all of which are caused by the mutant abilities of those remaining soldiers. Liang's original plan was to send more than 3,000 soldiers to directly destroy the coalition forces in one face, so that he could feel his own terror, but he was wiped out by a nuclear bomb, which did not annoy him, but it was uncomfortable. Therefore, as soon as the remaining soldiers came up, they appeared with the ability to kill a wide range, so that these coalition forces instantly suffered huge damage. Human life became very worthless at this time, and so did the weapons and equipment, which did not even have the strength to resist under the attack of the soldiers, and the tanks were destroyed and the rocket vehicles exploded, leaving the entire coalition positions in a mess. Even at this time, they still didn't even see the shadow of the enemy. They had already suffered such a terrible blow, and the impact on their momentum was devastating. Even people with a strong mind can't help but be afraid at this time. This is a war between humans and non-humans. The result is also obvious, the death of countless people, but also the military heart shakes. People's hearts are unstable. Ah. Some were screaming, others were yelling. The coalition forces were in a mess, they hadn't found their targets, and now it was a mess. At this time, in the temporary command of the battlefield, it had become silent, and the generals who were originally full of ambition, one by one, looked like earth, and now they had finally tried the terror that existed in Liang and his command, and they were all desperate. Gentlemen, look at the way we are now. Unfortunately we failed. General America got up, he sorted out his clothes, made himself look calm, and then said, "May the Lord bless us, and may that demon return to hell." With that he walked out, took the gun from the guard's hand, and strode into the battlefield. The others looked at each other, but at this moment there was only one emotion brewing in the air, and that was despair. The general of Huaxia sighed, stood up, saluted the commanders of other countries, and then said loudly, "The existence of Liang is indeed a disaster for the entire human world. At this time, we are all soldiers, we cannot back down, all of you. It is an honor to have a fight with your colleagues." General Oluz did not say anything, but simply got up on his own, led his guards, and rushed to the battlefield. Others are infected by this senseless spirit and do the same, while others flee without thinking, and for this type of person, their lives are far higher than others. The same rise to raise hundreds of people, often only when they are in a disaster, can clearly see the good and evil of people's hearts, which is a stubborn disease of human society. After all, people's hearts are different. It was just a small corner of the entire battlefield, and no one usually paid attention to it, but Leon paid attention to it through Svija, and he saw the officers who rushed out of the headquarters, and these people raised their guns one by one, like ordinary soldiers, and shot into the air. And a considerable number of people took advantage of the chaos to escape from the other direction. Seeing this scene, Liang just skimmed his lips and pointed to the scene on the screen in front of him. "Destroy those who have escaped." "Okay, sir." Svija responded. In the battlefield, there were more than a dozen commanders who chose to flee, all from different countries, who felt that they did not have to lose their lives for other countries, so it was natural to flee. One by one, protected by the guards, they got into armored vehicles and were scattering and fleeing in several directions, and their speed soon increased. But at this time a series of beams of light suddenly fell from the sky, hit a convoy, and instantly pierced all the vehicles, and then, there was a violent explosion, and this convoy was destroyed in one face. The other fleeing convoys could not escape this result, and in less than a minute they were wiped out one by the soldiers in the sky. Seeing this scene, Liang smiled coldly. "At this time, I still don't give me a united resistance. Are you people really a decoration?" He hates this kind of people, because in his opinion, this kind of people are opportunistic people, who have no help to human society in the slightest, and who occupy a lot of social resources and discourse power one by one, and the existence of such people is the stone that hinders the progress of human society. Leon wanted to watch human society grow rapidly under his persecution, rather than watching such people live in peace. This matter was left behind in the blink of an eye, because this point of destruction was not worth his attention at all, and at this time in the battlefield, because of the continuous attacks of the soldiers, the entire coalition camp had caused great chaos, and in just a few moments, there were already tens of thousands of casualties, which was an extremely terrible battle loss. However, these allied soldiers did not even see the shadow of the enemy who attacked them, but only knew that the attack came from the sky, so one by one they aimed their guns at the sky, and the bullets were released like rain. Liang only shook his head slightly when he saw this, and sighed. The conventional mode of human warfare is still too naive for the soldiers, and without powerful weapons, in the face of this generational gap, there is no resistance at all. Episode 144. He lost interest after watching it for a while, and said directly, "Hurry up and end the battle. Such a war is very boring." "Okay, sir." Svija's answer was as succinct as ever. As he said, such a battle is indeed very boring. Any soldier has the ability to compete with Magneto for a while. This is a terrifying ability. Dealing with ordinary people is almost like spraying a tube of insecticide on a nest of ants. If it is a head-on confrontation and allows the soldiers to rush into the camp, the consequences will certainly be even more terrible, and Liang did not let the soldiers do this, but attacked from the air, and all he did was to put great pressure on these soldiers and make them collapse themselves. Now it seems that although the coalition has become extremely chaotic, the will to fight has not yet died, so this kind of blow must last for a while, but Leon does not want to wait now, so he receives orders from Svija to quickly resolve the battle. And Svija's orders to the soldiers were also very direct, which was the kind of direct killing mode that Leon originally thought. In the battlefield, the soldiers finally saw the appearance of the enemy, because the soldiers had fallen from the sky, quickly landed, and appeared between them. Hundreds of soldiers appeared together, but distributed throughout the battlefield, but like mud cattle into the sea, there was no wind and waves, and each soldier found the target of attack, and suddenly all the fire was vented on the soldiers. There was a dense gunfire in the middle of the battlefield, all the soldiers gathered their soldiers, bullets hit the soldiers like raindrops, crackling, and Mars splashed around, but they did not cause half damage to the soldiers. At this time, the soldiers had already landed on the ground, and one by one they were all emitting electric light, just like a large electric light. The crowd was slightly agitated, and after seeing this change in the soldiers, they were all slightly stunned, and then after reacting, the attack became more rapid. And at this moment, all the soldiers stretched out their hands, slightly open, the arc of electricity on their bodies beat more and more densely, and then, with a clang, like a crack, a fierce electric light erupted from each soldier's body. These electric rays are like chains of lightning, using each soldier as a carrier, entangled in each other's bodies, and then excited in all directions. It is worth noting that now all the soldiers are in the crowd, just like adding some special carriers of conductive electricity to the crowd, through mutual connection, the lightning position is shrouded in the entire battlefield. In an instant, tens of millions of thunderbolts, thousands of thunderbolts, 10,000 thunderbolts, thunder and thunder, in short, you will use all the words that can describe thunder and lightning, and the entire camp of the coalition forces will be shrouded in thunder and lightning. Countless electric snakes scurried back and forth on each warrior, and the momentary paralysis made everyone scream bitterly. Countless screams, all of them convulsed and fell, countless electric snakes jumped back and forth in the field, and the entire coalition camp was only a kind of blue at this time, like a sea of light. In 3 minutes, the thunder and lightning swept through for a total of 3 minutes, and when 3 minutes passed, there was no longer a single warrior in the battlefield who could stand, and even the most determined warrior could not survive such a lightning strike. These thunderbolts were just the limit that a person could bear, and they just exceeded this limit by a little bit, and after 3 minutes of terrifying electrotherapy, all the Allied soldiers had fallen. This is an indiscriminate attack, so to speak. This is a screening of these people by Leon. If you can survive the past, you can survive, and if you can't survive, there is only one way to die. Leon is not a murderous person, he has reason, he will destroy the will to fight of this coalition army, and he will not have half a hand, killing decisively, but in his opinion, unnecessary killing, is very boring. This is not a virgin, like an ordinary person facing a group of moving ants, on a whim, will soak urine to disperse the entire ant nest. This is not a person to destroy a country. Such a killing is not worth mentioning at all in the eyes of normal people. After all, no one will pay attention to the life and death of ants, and the life of ants is not even interesting to people. But sometimes people will stop to observe these ants scattered by urine, and will sigh that the vitality of these ants is really tenacious. In addition, this person does not even have the interest in stepping on another foot. Yes, Leon is this mentality now. Ordinary people are no different from ants to him. He made a move to defeat them. It was like giving an ant nest a puddle of urine, and then he didn't bother to step on it again, just curious, wondering how many people could survive under his screening. According to his estimates, of these more than 200,000 people, it is estimated that at least half of them will die, that is, more than a dozen tens of thousands, although he did not do it himself, but also because of his orders, he did not have the slightest change in mood. It can be said that he is cold-blooded, it can also be said that he is ruthless. But he did not regret doing so, and compared to the killings caused by humans themselves before, this kind of death seemed to him to be very small. And he also deliberately left some people, that is, the few coalition generals who regarded death as homecoming. They were separated separately, and at this time, looking at the smoke in the battlefield, everyone fell to the ground. One by one has become extremely lost. The American general had his eyes wide open and muttered, "The devil. God, what a devil." The general of Huaxia squeezed his hands tightly. The tiger's eyes were tearful. The hatred in his eyes was like substance. His body trembled uncontrollably, and he didn't say anything. The general of Oris was silent, his face livid, others some pale, with a face full of disbelief, some simply weeping with blows. This is Leon. He has achieved his goal. Even if there are only a few hundred soldiers, he still easily destroys the coalition army, very crisp, without dragging mud and water. Well, to tell the truth, it is also quite boring. The coalition forces of several countries can only cause such losses to themselves, and it seems that they must continue to increase their efforts. Leon shook his head helplessly. Episode 145. In this big war, the coalition side suffered heavy losses, and Liang's side only lost some soldiers. These soldiers looked precious, and it was not easy to manufacture one by one, but in fact, these things were just mass-produced dongzi for Liang. As long as anything is mass-produced, its value must be greatly reduced. In the battlefield at this time, only those generals of various countries could stand, and those soldiers of the coalition forces were all passed out by lightning shocks, and a large part of them really could not open their eyes anymore. As to whether they could survive, it depended on the physical quality of these people. After doing this, all the soldiers present quickly gathered together, surrounded all the generals and commanders, and the electronic eyes bloomed with a blue light, and the appearance looked full of science and technology, and with a strange sense of sharpness. Ah! The American general's eyes were red, his face was distorted, like a beast that wanted to choose people to eat, full of a kind of hostility and killing, and a strong hatred, looking at the eyes of those soldiers who wanted to spew fire. You devils, you devils, you devils. He roared loudly, his voice was terrible, almost unable to suppress his anger. He did not seem to be ready to suppress his anger. The next moment he directly raised his hand, and the gun in his hand also spewed out a tongue of fire in time. Snap, 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 snap. A series of gunshots were as crisp as the sound of dense fried beans, and all the bullets were hit on the body of the first alloy of the warrior, shooting out a flower of Mars, but there was not even a little dent. Devil, you are Satan's minions, and you should all go to hell and suffer endless sufferings in hell. The American general was furious and cursed incessantly, and the bullets in the gun in his hand were quickly burned out, leaving only the crisp sound of the firing pin. Even so, he did not stop, but instead roared in anger and rushed up with his rifle as a stick. The rifle smashed into the soldier's body, which should have been the right sound, but the result was no sound. Vibratory gold, also known as sound-absorbing steel, its meaning is also as the name suggests, can absorb vibration, but does not produce anti-shock and sound. At this time, the other generals and commanders also reacted, and one by one they also began to shoot, and they completely regarded themselves as warriors, not survivors of the coalition forces. The gunfire in the field was loud, the tongue of fire spewed, there was no pause, knowing that they could not do anything but they could not bear it, saying that they were now, even if they knew that there would be no half a result, but they still did it. But after all, the useless work will stop, and when the gunfire stops, they all find that the soldiers have no sign of damage at all, and they can't help but become more desperate. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Some people are desperate. His despair is not his own life and death, but the discovery that the guns in his hands have no way to do anything with these things, which is the real despair. Why is that? That's impossible. In this case, some people were already in a state of collapse and could not accept this, and the death and injury of more than 200,000 people made the line that they had been tight to break because the soldiers were not even half broken. At this time, the American general, who had been hitting the soldiers, was directly pushed back by the soldiers in front of him, who kept falling backwards, and then fell to the ground and rolled to the side of the others. Master, let me tell you, if you don't want to be exterminated, then try to resist. If the resistance is not enough, then you will all die. And you here are talking about all the masters of mankind to let you do your own thing. A soldier makes a mechanical sound, without a hint of mood swings, extremely flat. Fuck, what the hell are you? Why on earth would Leon do this? Answer me. His anger was like substance, but there was nothing he could do with these soldiers. The master said that it is his interest to call it interest to cause you to grow and evolve. The soldier's voice was still flat, as if it were expressing something inconsequential, and it embraced a powerful intelligence, which was Speech's subroutine, and the level of intelligence was not so terrible. Hearing this, everyone did not understand very well, only the American general roared, "No, he has no right to do this. Evolution and growth are the business of all mankind, not something he alone can control. He cannot do this." The soldier's voice was still mechanical, and he said calmly, "No, the master said that he has such a right. He said that there are countless terrible civilizations in the universe, and the earth is better to evolve in the hands of the master than to relax and be destroyed by other civilizations. And the master said, become powerful. You have the ability to continue to survive, otherwise, it is better to be directly destroyed by him." When these people heard this, they immediately felt quite absurd. They did not have the height of Liang, naturally could not understand Liang's state of mind, but in terms of social civilization, what Liang did was undoubtedly extremely evil, so they did not intend to just admit defeat. The President of the United States gritted his teeth. "Kill me, otherwise, I will definitely let him taste great suffering." The master said not to kill you, because you are the representative of human society who resisted him. You are very good people, you must stay, and those who are not willing to resist the master will be killed. The soldiers continued to speak calmly. These people were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood, and they were eager to appear in front of Liang at once, and then kill him in person. Heck, human beings are born free, and I will never let him succeed. Without saying a word, the American general actually rushed straight up to start a fierce battle with the soldiers. Well, this is the general's self-assumption. In fact, he just rushed over and then kicked back by the soldiers. The next moment, the soldier's body emitted Liang's voice. If you are bent on dying, I will also let you do what you want, and think clearly. Will it erupt in front of me once and then be killed directly by me, or will it bring me more trouble after saving your life? Leon? The general was stunned. It's me. Leon's voice was also flat. By the way, I forgot to say that although your coalition was defeated by me, there are still some people who survive. Not all of them are dead, and if you want to die, I will let the survivors die with you. If you choose to continue to live, these people will be able to live with you. Well, you choose. This was a soul torture, and when he learned that not all the allied soldiers were dead, the general was immediately overjoyed, and the answer he had to choose was self-evident. He was silent, but Leon understood his choice and said, very well, you made the right choice, and the world may change because of you.